Joining us, MS Now's Alex Tabbitt reporting from Minneapolis. Michael Feinberg is a former special agent in charge with the FBI and an MS Now national security and intelligence analyst. Catherine Christian is former assistant DA for the Manhattan DA's office and an MS Now legal analyst. So, Alex, what's the mood on the ground as people brace for even more federal agents in the city?
Well, Chris, in the 2 days since we saw 37-year-old Renee Good shot and killed by an ICE agent, we've seen an evolution of emotions. In the immediate aftermath, there was a sense of shock amongst the community here in the Twin Cities. We saw that turn into anger with protests flaring up, skirmishes between demonstrators and ICE agents, Border Patrol agents. And today we're hearing a message of defiance from state and local leaders here in Minneapolis who are not backing down on their investigation or their attempts to investigation that they're currently being frozen out of. Now, I want you to hear from the mayor of Minneapolis, who was asked about his previous statements. In the aftermath of this shooting, Mayor Frey said ICE agents should get the F out of Minneapolis. He was asked if he stands by that statement. I want you to hear what he had to say.
They stand by their statements. Do you stand by your statements? Yes. I stand by my statements. We stand by our statement. You know, this notion of inflammatory comments, I mean, come on, guys. You know, I dropped an F-bomb. They killed somebody. Which one of those is more inflammatory? I'm going with the killing somebody.
And in the midst of all this, Chris, DHS is doubling and tripling down on their immigration crackdown here in Minneapolis. I've been in contact with ICE verifiers, ICE observers. Those are people who, community members who trail ICE, who let community members know that ICE is in their neighborhood so that people can shelter in place, can stay safe. The same work that Renee Good was doing. And they tell me that they've been busier than ever right now as this immigration crackdown continues on in full force. Chris?
Thank you for that. Michael, do you think more law enforcement coming in from, as we said, Chicago, New Orleans, helps or hurts the situation?
Oh, I don't think it's even a question. I think it emphatically hurts the situation, exacerbates things, and is likely to create more incidents of violence. As the mayor stated, Minneapolis is not a city that has had a serious problem with criminal violence recently. 50% of their shootings recently, he said, were by government agents. And we need to reiterate that. We are in a situation where masked agents are refusing to identify themselves and gunning down civilians who are not committing any crimes of violence. This is palpably insane. In 48 hours, this has happened in 2 cities. What the situation calls for is de-escalation, good faith negotiations on the part of the federal government with states about what they actually need in their jurisdictions, and a willingness to back down when their presence is not appropriate or helpful.
So, Catherine, what we heard from Jacob Frey, obviously, you hear the frustration, but he, other local officials, the governor, have been calling for a fair and credible investigation, even though the FBI has frozen out locals from the investigation. Well, the Hennepin County DA's office says they still believe that they have jurisdiction, that they could bring charges against the shooter in this case. Though, as a practical matter, wondering how you build a case if you don't have access to the evidence.
Exactly. They do, and they can charge under the state law, but they should be prepared for if that happens. The defendant, the ICE agent, if he's prosecuted, is going to seek to have the case removed to federal court. Why? Because he's a federal officer performing federal duties. And in many ways, it actually might be better for the state to be before a federal judge who can then order the FBI and ICE to cooperate. Good luck with a state judge trying to order the FBI or ICE to. But I anticipate if they do prosecute, if they do indict him, that his lawyers will seek to remove the case to federal court.
But that's not to say that that prosecution couldn't move forward.
That's correct. But it's going to be, as you said, very difficult if the federal government is not cooperating.
Okay, so Michael, is there a precedent being set by the FBI cutting out local investigators, and maybe one that could have implications moving forward?
So I want to choose my words very carefully here, because there is a ton that bothers me about what is happening on the ground in Minneapolis and how federal law enforcement is acting in general. But I'll confess this is not at the top of my worries. And the reason is, if the FBI has an investigation going, and we should be very clear, we don't know what type of investigation it is. It could be a civil rights investigation into the shooting. They could also be doing an assault on a federal officer investigation against the driver and the passenger, simply to give DHS a pretext for not taking the shooting seriously. We can't put anything past the FBI's current leadership. But it is very normal for them not to comment or share information in a lot of investigations. Now, this is a bit anomalous because police shootings, law enforcement shootings, are always high visibility, high tension affairs that have very real ramifications for civil society and civic discourse. So there is sort of unspoken rule that those investigations be done as quickly as possible and that the Justice Department share their results with local partners. But again, we don't actually know at this point what the FBI is doing, so I'm reluctant to pass judgment on the appropriateness or anomalous nature of them not sharing right now.
Okay, so Alex, we're also learning more today about the ICE officer who is at the center of this, including a previous dragging incident. What can you tell us?
That's right, Chris. This is what we know so far about Jonathan Ross, who we should note has not yet been charged with a crime. Now, according to DHS, Ross has more than 10 years of experience as an ICE deportation officer. He was selected for ICE's special response team, He's received continuous and ongoing training in several specialized skills, including breaching techniques, perimeter control, advanced firearms training, and hostage rescue. And we also know that this officer was previously dragged by a car during an immigration raid back in June. According to court documents, Ross was attempting to arrest an undocumented immigrant. The undocumented immigrant was not complying. Ross put his arm through the window of that car. The car sped away, and that led to lacerations on his arm, which eventually resulted in 33 stitches. Chris?
So, Catherine, Vice President J.D. Vance, that was the first that we had heard about that incident, the dragging incident. I want to play exactly what he said yesterday.
That very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile?
Again, we don't know, and we did not see, at least from the video, that he was rammed with an automobile. But even that being said, I was a little surprised to hear J.D. Vance say he's a little bit sensitive. What do you make of that incident and how it might play into this case, if there ever is a case?
It cuts both ways for the ICE agent, because he can say, I had a reasonable belief that this car would cause imminent death or serious physical injury because it happened to me. I was reaching in the car and then this guy dragged me. Now, remember, there were other officers there that were actually reaching into the vehicle. So he could argue, I was really concerned more about them from being dragged. The other way it cuts is, if you knew that could happen, why in the world were you in front of that car anyway? Why would you even be there putting yourself in that position so it can happen? So either way, it can work for him or work against him.
Michael, the other thing that struck me about this was just saying that he had put his hand into the car. Is that kind of standard police procedure in a situation like that?
It's really difficult to say without knowing what the interactions were before the cameras started rolling and so on and so forth. But I'm just going to say this. Based on what I saw, the entire contingent of ICE agents there, acted extremely unprofessional. They rushed the vehicle instead of tactically pausing to determine whether there was another way they could have communicated. Most law enforcement vehicles have speakers and microphones. If they were that concerned about safety, they could have established a perimeter and done a call out asking the driver to leave. Instead, we see them rushing out of the vehicle, swearing and screaming at the passenger, going for the car door. The agent who ultimately fires the shot places himself in front of the vehicle of his own accord. They just didn't handle things in a way that responsible, well-trained law enforcement should have handled it. They had other options that did not involve escalation. They had other options that would have been safer for both themselves and the passengers. And they made a very conscious choice to ignore those safer options.
So let me ask you about something that the New York Times reported, Michael, that weeks before the shooting incident, officials at ICE warned agents on the ground to remain vigilant about protesters and, this is a quote, be prepared to take appropriate and decisive action should you be faced with an imminent threat. Are we going to see a debate over what constitutes an imminent threat moving forward, and what is appropriate action?
No, as the other guests know, the reasonably objective standard that governs deadly force policies has been well established in federal law at this point for decades. There has not been a ton of movement in those precedents or that case law. Everybody is trained on the same standards. Everybody knows what the right and left guardrails are. It's just, it's abhorrent the way this played out yesterday.